Now, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier that has been for months launching missions in the Iran war and where sailors have been facing terrible conditions, is now heading home. Another carrier, the USS George Washington, took its place in the Middle East, and the Lincoln is making its way back to San Diego. Meanwhile, new reporting from MS Now finds that the straining of ships like the Lincoln has had quite a toll. Quote, after nearly 6 months in a fast-paced, unplanned war with Iran, the parts on board the Navy's aircraft carriers are at risk of wearing out. That includes the plumbing and air conditioning systems, catapults that launch fighter jets, and the gear that catches the planes slamming to a halt on the floating runway. The ships will then likely require extended maintenance to repair them. The Navy did not return requests for comments about delayed maintenance of those ships. I want to bring in MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, who is bylined on that incredible story. She is also a former officer in the Navy. Tom and General Hertling are back with us. Priya, you have been covering the terrible conditions on the USS Lincoln. Talk about the significance for these families of this ship heading back to the U.S.
Yeah, Alicia, I think it's so important to take a moment to acknowledge that the USS Abraham Lincoln is finally heading back to San Diego. I don't think that's anything that these Lincoln families had anticipated, because in a meeting earlier this month with Navy leadership, they had actually told them to plan for a projected December 31st timeline. So it really feels as though these family members who decided to bravely speak up and share their concerns about their loved ones, the sailors and Marines who were on this ship, that resulted in public pressure and lawmakers demanding questions from the Pentagon. And I believe that's really what has prompted the Navy to now relieve this ship with the USS George Washington. But in addition to all of those questions that were raised as far as the morale, the exhaustion, the conditions as a result of this extended deployment, now many former senior Navy officials are telling me that they're worried about the wear and tear and the damage on these $22 billion aircraft carriers themselves. As you mentioned, typically these deployments are only supposed to be about 6 to 7 months long. But in this administration, we've been hitting new records, and these deployments have been anywhere from 9 to 12 months, which means the maintenance period in turn, which is only usually about 8 months, is now being extended out to a year and a half. And as a result of that, then the aircraft carriers that are out at sea, their deployments are being extended, and this cycle just keeps continuing. Typically, at any given time, out of the 11 aircraft carriers that the Navy has, only 3 to 4 of them are deployable. And already in this war in Iran, Alicia, we have used 3 different aircraft carriers: the USS Ford, which already went home, the Lincoln, which is going home now, the George H.W. Bush, which is still in theater in the Middle East, and now the George Washington, which is relieving the Lincoln. So we've basically used all of our deployable aircraft carriers on this one war, not to mention that we're leaving the Pacific theater uncovered by moving the Washington into the Middle East to relieve the Lincoln. So basically, if anything were to happen in any other part of the world, we're simply running out of ships at this point.
General Hertling, can you speak to that and the conversations that are likely happening behind closed doors about what is available to the president given the multiple conflicts we are now in?
Yeah, this is a fascinating story, and I continue to compliment Priya on the work she's doing. But we're now taking the story beyond the Lincoln, as Priya just said. The Lincoln is a visible symptom of something the military calls a force generation issue. The Navy can surge forces when there's an emergency. That's what militaries do in an emergency. But a surge is supposed to be temporary. If operational tempo becomes normal or goes outside the range of normal, you begin consuming future readiness to meet today's requirements. You know, I once had a Navy guy tell me that ships aren't rental cars. You don't bring one back, throw the keys to the caretaker, and then send it out again with the new customer. Every extra month deployed creates maintenance requirements that eventually have to be paid. And you know, it's really interesting because the Washington, the USS George Washington, coming out of Japan, where they are home based, is focused on the Pacific. And that's the #1 priority on not only the national security strategy, but the national defense strategy. So you leave that area uncovered, as Priya just said. And you have to remember There are 11 aircraft carriers. Listen to me, an Army guy saying all this. Tom's going to probably correct me. But a carrier strike group is part of a system. It's the carriers, it's the destroyers, it's the air wings, it's the helicopters, it's the weapons, the engines, and thousands of sailors. So every additional steaming hour that these ships do consumes service life of all of those things, to include the people. And as we've taken it again, since Tom and I are so consumed with our wives, it affects the families much more than it affects the sailors.
Tom, I want you to augment all of the analysis that we just heard from General Hertling, but I just want to add in here, you talk to members of Congress and they will say, we don't feel we have full visibility into any of this. We don't feel we have full visibility into munitions stockpiles. It's not clear to us whether the President of the United States knows the limitations that are now currently in place. Help me understand where this all fits together.
Well, if only there were something Congress could do about it as the Article I branch of government. What a mystery. And I think this ties back into something we were talking about in the first segment about trying to stomp on outlets like Stars and Stripes. One of the things you see from this administration in general, but this Defense Department in particular, is a kind of paranoia about anybody learning anything about what's going on inside the Pentagon or with our operations in the middle of war. That is a huge change from the way the Pentagon used to operate. Go back to Reagan and Bush and George W. Bush and the wars we were fighting, Clinton and the operations in places like Somalia. Compared to this Pentagon, those administrations were paragons of transparency. They wanted buy-in from Congress. They wanted the American people to support these missions. This Pentagon, in particular, it's emblematic of everything that happens in this administration. The people that support us, our political partisans, and the people who support us, those are the real Americans. Everybody else is an enemy. They have to be kept outside. They have to be kept in the dark. Congress is absolutely shirking, and when I say Congress, I mean the Republican majority in Congress. It's absolutely shirking its responsibility to find out what the hell's going on out here. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. And I think it gets really exhausting to hear them just constantly shrug and say, well, gosh, we're just not getting enough information. Well, then demand it. You're Congress. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
Priya, I have less than 30 seconds left.
If I can, Alicia, I got to say this because Tom hits it right on the head. There's an Article I of our Constitution which deals with the Congress. Somewhere in that Article I is a line that says Congress builds and maintains an army and a navy. And maintains means that they have to check on the readiness rate of the Army and the Navy. They're not doing that. And it's infuriating to us seeing it on the outside because, the officers, the generals and flag officers, the admirals, they're doing what they're being told to do.